Hey there, welcome back. My name's Emily. I wanted to do like a mid-year book tag. I've seen a couple other like YouTubers do it, and I was just curious because I've never done one before, and it's kind of fun to check in with yourself midway through the year and see everything you've read so far and kind of just what your goals are, expectations, stuff like that. So I'm very excited. I have some questions that I found off this YouTuber Emmy. So shout out to her because she's really sweet and has great recommendations as always. I think I've talked about her before. Favorite book this year so far, and I've talked about it before, but it's going to be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I've already read it twice. I can't get enough of this story. I think about it way too often. I don't know if it's healthy how much I think about this story. I just feel like it's such a good book. I love how misunderstood the monster is, the confliction with Dr. Frankenstein, and like wanting to explore science, chemistry, and experiment, but also coming to terms with what he did and how morally it's very questionable. So both of the characters are very questionable with their intentions and actions, but that's what makes it so good. The monster that Frankenstein created wasn't inherently bad. Like he was just a victim of his circumstance. Like he wanted to read, write, embrace culture, experience life, having a partner, all these things. And it was denied to him because of who he was and what he looked like. And he was a product of his environment basically, and why he became so violent and so hated amongst the culture and the people there. So it's such a good story, and you're in his head, right? But you just want to know like what would make you want to create a being like that. Like I understand wanting to like feel powerful and smart. Like I would not have the cojones to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna create this monster, this being, and just like see what happens. you know So, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is my favorite book of the year so far. The best sequel I've read, so I haven't read a crazy amount of sequels, right? It's just not something I've gotten around to very much this year, but my favorite one out of the few that I have read would be Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I like this one a lot more than Divine Rivals. Ruthless Vows, I feel like it tied the series up. There was more action in this one. A lot more character development and like the world development, because in the first book there's not a lot of world development. You're kind of just like thrown into it. There's not a lot of explanation. Sorry, my cat. But I just feel like the world building in this one was so much better. So highly recommend. Great story. The biggest surprise that I've read, so this author's not like super popular. This is her first published, like she has another series I read, and it's like a dark mafia romance interconnected standalone series. But I picked up Gothicana by Runix, and this is more like a historical fiction with a little bit of romance. Like there's romance, but it's not super heavy, and the vibes. This book was very atmospheric. You could just feel the spooky school, and I just really loved how this book made me feel, and it was so different from her Dark Verse series that I was pleasantly surprised, because I thought she was just going to continue writing stuff like that, but this is published traditionally. Dark Verse is independent published, probably because of like the topics that are discussed are pretty dark, but highly recommend. She's a queen. I'm in her Facebook group, and the people in there are so sweet. She's amazing. Love her. Can't wait for more books by her to be written. The syndicator for the Dark Verse series is supposed to come out this year, and I'm just like hooting and hollering over it. Like that made me sound so southern. Books that made me happy. So my thing with reading is I like reading books that make me feel things, whether that's happiness, sadness, anger, frustration. Like I remember books based on how they make me feel. Doesn't matter if I don't remember the plot or what the characters' names are. I always remember how I felt in that time when I was reading the book. I have two for this. The first one's gonna be Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. I was very surprised by this one. And then Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. So Butcher and Blackbird, this was one of the first books I read when I first moved to Georgia, and I was just so stressed out and tired and just so much was going on, right? So this book was the perfect escape for me. It's funny, there's dark humor, romance, there were so many good points in this book that just really helped take me out of what was going on around me, and I just enjoyed it so much. You'll never look at ice cream the same. Guarantee you that. But such a great read. I had such a fun time reading this book. And the second book, Leather and Lark, also very good. I wouldn't say it was as funny as Butcher and Blackbird. I enjoyed it very much so as well. I didn't have expectations really going into this book, so I went to a random little private owned bookstore or independent owned bookstore in Blairsville because my parents were moving and I just was driving around one day and I found this bookstore. They had this, I didn't know anything about it. I literally just picked it up because it was a new release and I read it and I had such a good time reading this book. Like, it's a contemporary romance, nothing crazy, but I just love the concept of this story. So the couple meet through a Reddit post and they're having issues like relationship wise, like everyone they date, when they break up, they find the next person who their ex finds is like their partner, their soulmate, like they end up getting married. And so, what's his name? Yeah, Emma and Justin, they go back and forth, they end up meeting, falling in love, all that jazz. It was just a really great story. It gave the perfect summer beach cottagecore vibes. Like, it was just really fun. I had a great time reading it. And the way Abby Jimenez incorporated like mental health and overall well-being of a person, a relationship, stuff like that, she does really well. Same thing with Yours Truly by her. That book was really great for anxiety representation. Like, it's very rare that anxiety is depicted, I feel like, in an accurate way, because I am someone who has really bad anxiety, and that book was such a like breath of fresh air. Coming from someone who's super anxious, especially in social settings, like the main character in that story, how he deals with it, how he takes care of himself, and how he interacts with others, it was just so wholesome. And they write letters. So this, it's like, it's just so funny, like the Reddit posts, and then he like writes her these like after date questionnaires, like I can't remember what they're called, but it was so funny. Like, how can I improve said date? Like, where would you like to go next? Would you do this date again? Type thing. So it was really wholesome. So highly recommend Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez and Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. A book that made me cry. So if there's one thing about me, I'm gonna cry. It doesn't matter what is going on. I'm a very sensitive person and I will cry. Like, I have crybaby tattooed on me. I'm very sensitive. So when I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, I was not expecting to cry as much as I did. And I have since learned that I have to take a break in between Kristen Hanna books because there is a 99% chance I will cry. But The Nightingale, it's a historical fiction, and it takes place in France during when Nazi Germany was occupying and taking over, and it's about two sisters and two different ways of how they deal with the war. So one sister is raising her kid, she's having to take in Nazi soldiers into her home, and then the other sister is basically trying to free any person who is fighting against the Nazis and getting them back to where they need to go. So she's hiking through mountains with refugees of other countries for war, and it was just such an intense story. It was incredibly empowering as a woman to read a book about other women going through hard things and coming through it on the other side stronger. And that's one thing about Kristen Hanna, is how she portrays women is very empowering. Like, she is always able to kind of get you right into the story. You can feel like you're right there, and you can like feel their pain, their triumph, their excitement, their sorrow. It's just insane how Kristen Hanna is able to do that. I've read probably like 6 or 7 books by her so far, and that's just this year. And this was the second book I read by her. I want to say second or third, because I read The Women, I read Homefront, and then I read The Nightingale. Yeah, so third. Such a great story, highly recommend. But have your tissues handy because that shit is intense. Favorite new author. So I have one. I found her in a Facebook group, right? And I think I've talked about her before, but her debut series is The Last Storm, and her name is JD Linton, and I can't even tell you how much I enjoyed this series. So far it's 3 books. The first 2 are about this one couple, and then this 3rd book is about the girl's mom, and it's just such a great fantasy series. It's like fantasy romance, but the world building and the world itself really isn't difficult to understand. You're more so involved with the characters and what's going on in their life, and I am obsessed. I binged this entire series, 3 books, in like maybe 4 days. Like, I could not be stopped. I lost sleep. I did not eat. I just read this book. And it was just so good. Like Rogue and Era, like Ara, it just made me feel all the things. And then reading about Ara and her mom and her dad who had passed, because throughout the first 2 books you know her father is dead, but once you get to the 3rd book, it's about her mom and how her dad met, and you know how it's gonna end, right? It still had me crying like a baby, but I loved it. Like, the masochist in me loved it. I could not stop. And so that's why I'd recommend this book, and her writing, it's such a good time. If you want a fantasy series that's enjoyable, somewhat quick-paced, you know, it's not really heavy on the world building, like I said, so it's more so like you're just going with these characters throughout their life and their experiences. So it is pretty fast-paced and very interesting, like magic-wise, characters, like with their magic. It was, it makes me want to reread it again. I'm like fingers crossed for the next book in this series too, because like there's one thing about me, I hate reading books when the series isn't finished. I like knowing what's going on. I like knowing what's happening. I don't like being left on cliffhangers. I hate being left on a cliffhanger. That's like, ooh, it makes me so mad. But I got nothing but time to wait, I suppose. Another new favorite author, I feel like this is a lot of people's favorite author, but I just started reading the series pretty recently, and that's going to be The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. And I just finished The Hobbit the other day, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The only thing I did not like is how they have a little song, a little chorus number for every situation. They got a song for anything. The characters, like how Tolkien's able to just like write you into the story, same thing. It was just so enjoyable. I had a great time reading it. I'm about to start the first book. I'm about to start The Fellowship of the Ring. I only read a couple pages before I fell asleep, so I want to get back into that. I've just been taking a break because this took a lot out of me. I've kind of been in a slump since I read this book. So I need to get back into reading. I've just been taking a break because sometimes you just need a break from reading. And I haven't been enjoying my puzzle that I'm doing right now, and my mom knows why. It's all brown. That's all I'm gonna say. Actually, no, it's not all I'm gonna say. The Marauders map from Harry Potter, right? It's all brown. And it didn't even come with a poster. So whoever made the puzzles for the Harry Potter Wizarding World, at least put a poster in there, bro. Like, come on. Like, how am I supposed to look at a map and not have like a picture of the actual map? Like, the letters on the puzzle pieces for the map are so tiny. And I'm out here just trying to do my puzzle. And I can't see because the words are so small and there's no like image to go off of, and it's infuriating. I've gotten maybe 30 pieces in 3 days. So, not going well. My reading's not going well at the moment, but it's okay because we'll get through it. It's just life, you know, experiment, try new things. Some of my newest favorite characters. This is the only one I'm going to repeat. The monster from Frankenstein, okay? I love him. He is a king. He deserves representation and validation with his feelings, okay? That's all I'm gonna say there. And then Gandalf and Bilbo, they're so funny. I had such a good time with them. Like, Gandalf is just out here doing wizard shit, and Bilbo's just like on this adventure, but all he wants to do is go home and drink some tea, and like, I felt that So definitely like top tier characters at that moment. So we'll see if it changes, but I don't know, I'm pretty set in my ways about this one. So some of my biggest disappointments this year would definitely, I feel like I'm not the only one with this. Crescent City 3, House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. I read this book a couple months ago. Couldn't tell you. I have erased this book from my dome. The only real thing I remember is how much I hate Bryce. Hunt doesn't really do it for me as like an MMC. And usually I'm the one rooting for the MMC over the FMC. So it's fine. But it was so focused on the other characters. You couldn't really tell who the main character was really because you're constantly going back and forth, and the way the second book ended had me feral, okay? And then you have this, how many pages? 838 pages. And like nothing was resolved. I feel like I just remember this book making me so hostile. It just didn't hit the way every single one of her other books hit for me, and I was really disappointed. Like, obviously I read the whole thing, but I felt like some of my time was definitely wasted, and it just like infuriating. But it's fine, I'll still read her other books, I'm not opposed, but it was really frustrating. And then another disappointing read I had this year was Dracula by Bram Stoker. I just tried so hard to get into this story. I tried reading it maybe 4 or 5 different occasions, and it just wasn't, this is a DNF, just wasn't hitting the way I thought it was. And classics are kind of hit or miss. I thought I was going to be as obsessed with this as I was Frankenstein, so I think I had it on like a certain pedestal or had certain expectations for it that I feel didn't match to what I was reading. Maybe it got better, but I just like couldn't get past how the Dracula was like an old man who had stinky breath but was like super strong. Like, why did you have to comment on his breath? It just was just kind of weird. I don't know how I feel about it. But some books that I want to finish reading this year, I definitely want to finish reading One Dark Window. That's a duology. I have those because they just became free on Kindle Unlimited. So I want to read those and hopefully add another series that I've started and completed. I want to read a couple more classics too. Like, I really want to read Little Women. I also want to read Animal Farm by George Orwell. I also have Narnia downloaded on my Kindle that I've been wanting to read as well, just because like classics are kind of fun. They're timeless. I usually don't rate them. I just read them because they are classics for a reason. They're timeless. They give you what you want. And so I definitely want to read more classics. I started reading Crime and Punishment, but it just like didn't really hit for me. I have a lot of books, so basically like my top shelf is all books I've read, and then the bottom shelf is all books I haven't read. That's why I keep looking over here. I really want to reread the Beautiful Creatures series. I read that when I was in like middle school, I want to say, and was absolutely obsessed. So when I was reading like Harry Potter, Twilight, Divergent, and Beautiful Creatures was like my bread and butter in school, so I want to read that. And then yeah, I just want to like find some fantasy books. I don't really have expectations in regards to how much I read. I just want to read good books. It doesn't matter if it's classics, fantasy, romance, historical fiction, like nonfiction. I'll pretty much read anything if it seems like something I'd be into. If you have any other recommendations, please let me know. I love reading and I love getting absolutely invested. Like, put me in between those pages and write me in there. I love books like that. So I'm always looking for more recommendations. I'm not too picky. I just like having a good time while I read. You know, I read before bed, and if I lose sleep over it, it's okay. But I hope you guys are having a good time reading, enjoying your books, starting new series, finishing new series, have someone to read a book with, buddy read, because it doesn't matter how much you read, it just matters that you're enjoying what you're reading. Like, if you're not enjoying it, don't read it, you know? Like, it's okay if you don't want to finish a book, read books that you enjoy. Don't let anyone judge you, because I used to be really like embarrassed about me talking about reading romance books, but fuck them, you know? Like, what are they gonna do, stop you? No, they're not. So it's fine. Just read anything, even if it's the newspaper, a comic book, whatever, listening to it on audio. Like, as long as you're reading something, you're doing something good. I'm not one to judge. I've read some funky shit. So if you enjoyed, please like, comment, subscribe, leave book recommendations down below, and yeah, I hope you have a nice day. I'm gonna take a nap. Your girl is tired, and I put makeup on today. I did my eyeballs. I want to look cute. But thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and please leave book recommendations down below because I'm always looking for new things to read. How should I do this? Bye. See you.